Today's guest has over 2,100 episodes that are out there. That is a lot of podcasting, and that is a lot of lessons that we can learn from. This one, really interesting. Stay tuned. Gary Arndt. That once again, I think I'm getting that right. You said one hard dramatic syllable is what you said right before we started recording here. I loved it. You have such a unique story. You spent 13 years. You traveled 200 countries. You have been all over the damn place. I think that's an accurate statement.
Yeah, it's even more unique before that. I was in the right place at the right time in the 90s. I started an internet company, sold it before the dot-com bubble burst, got bored, went back to school, studied geology and geophysics, realized I didn't want to be an academic, and then came up with the idea of traveling the world, sold my home, thought I'd travel around the world for a year or two, turned into 13. Then the pandemic hit, which was not good if you were a travel content creator or a travel company or anything involved in the travel industry. So what happened is, quite literally, I can almost give you the rundown. January 28th, 2020, I come home from my last international trip. I have not been out of the country since. Came home from Portugal. March 1st, I get COVID. And I am sick I assume it's COVID. I never got tested because it was really early on still. Sure. There were no tests available. They're like, I'll save it for the healthcare people. Pretty sure it was just COVID. I felt horrible. That put me under for about 7 to 10 days. And then middle of the month, everything shuts down. And I'm thinking, well, it'll probably be done by April or May. No, that doesn't happen.
It was not.
And I had my concerns about where travel blogging and things like that. And I had a fairly big website, very popular social media accounts. I was a pretty recognized photographer. I'd won every major travel photography award there was to win. But things weren't looking good before the pandemic. It had become highly concentrated into just SEO, which meant that you constantly had to appease the Google algorithm, which meant you didn't have to actually travel. It didn't matter anymore. When I first started blogging back in 2006, that was social media. It was before Sure. Twitter, before Facebook, and people would come to your website and I'd have catchy, clever titles for my blog posts, and that all kind of went away. And I didn't like where it was going. And I had to make a decision as the pandemic became worse. It's like, I don't want to rely on just this one industry. And so back in 2018, I'd come up with an idea of launching a podcast that would be like 2 to 3 hour episodes that would discuss some topic in history. Like my first episode was going to be, why is the Mona Lisa so popular? And go into the history of the painting. And long story short, it was stolen in the early 20th century, and that's why it became popular. But I did the math, and it didn't really work out. So I was thinking this would be more of a hardcore history-like show where longer episodes published infrequently. I got the artwork for the show done, the theme music for the show, purchased the rights to it, never pulled the trigger. So in the pandemic, I went back to a discussion I had with a friend of mine who had launched a daily podcast. And he said it was one of the best things he had ever done. And so I did the math on this, and I'm like, this makes a lot more sense. There are several variables that go into the success of a show.
Sure.
Right? One of the biggest ones is time. Longer you've been around. And another big one is number of episodes. Well, the quickest way to do that is to just publish more frequently, right? Your daily show is going to have 7 times the number of a weekly show. More opportunities to be discovered through whatever means. And I started doing the math. It's like, well, if I put 2 ads in a daily show, that's 14 ads a week. If I put 14 ads in, say, an hour-long weekly show, that would be really annoying. But if you spread it out, to just 2 a day, it becomes kind of palatable. And so I thought, it was like, well, this actually works kind of better. And then I pounced the idea off one of my friends who had a very successful podcast. He said, one, this is a brilliant idea. Two, you're insane, because it's very hard to do a daily show.
That's the part where I would have come in and said the same thing. Because I mean,
it's like, well,
it's crazy.
I was a travel guy in the pandemic. I had nothing going on. So like I got time. And a lot of times in podcasting, you'll hear people talking about creating an avatar for your audience. My avatar was me. I just made the podcast that I would listen to. I'm very curious about a great many things, which was one of the reasons I traveled so much. And so I particularly created a show. So much of what we see today is created by an algorithm, right? That oh, you like this? Here's more of this. And you don't always want to see more of that. Like, yeah, I just wanted to see that one video that one time, but I don't want that to be my life now. But with a podcast, I can do something completely different every day, that there's a serendipity involved for listeners to learn about something new that's not algorithmically driven, but they're topics that I found interesting. And I figure, well, if I find them interesting, other people probably will too. So I launched the show on July 1st, 2020. And before I launched it, I created a list of 100 show ideas, which is an exercise I believe everybody should go through before they ever launch a show. They should always know what these are. Maybe every one of those ideas doesn't turn out to be a show, but at least you have this list. And I have been using the same list in Google Docs for 6 years, adding to it, taking stuff away as they get done. In fact, my show today was number one on that list. It was a topic that I created 6 years ago that I finally did, yesterday. And that's been a very helpful practice. And then I just started banging away at it every single day. And I basically treated it like a job.
To me, I mean, there's so many things there that the math behind it is one of those things that in podcasting and marketing, most people don't think of. Like you said, the 2 ads, super palatable, and like that math makes so much sense. And I've never heard someone put it so simply and so succinctly on that. The other thing that I find so interesting is like your episodes are like, I saw most of them around 15-minute-ish, that range-ish, heavy on the ish. There's some longer, some shorter, obviously.
So each episode is a script.
Sure.
The scripts we shoot for 2,000 words, might be a little more, might be a little less, which turns out to about in the body. So it's a 30-second cold open, 2 1-minute ads, about a 12-minute body.
Makes sense.
With then like a small bit afterwards. Those numbers can change a little bit, but roughly that's what it is. And I created that format before I launched the show, which means that because the ads are not running first, they're not pre-roll ads, they're mid-roll ads. But I'm not interrupting the body of the story, meaning I have a very clear audio signal when the ads start and a very clear audio signal when the ads end. And so the body of the story, which is 12 minutes long, is never interrupted by an ad. But I get the mid-roll ad bonus in terms of what they run for.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense with that. When you started doing that structure of the daily, that's a big part that fascinates me. Are you batch recording a lot of these, or
No.
You're recording every single day?
I have not recorded tomorrow's show yet.
Wow.
Because the recording is the easy part.
Sure.
So because I have a monologue show that is scripted, the editing is very, very minimal.
Yeah.
And what I do is I use GarageBand.
Makes sense.
That's it. Nothing fancy. I record until I reach a point where I don't like what I said, or I flubbed up, or I had a very difficult to pronounce foreign word. I just move it back on the waveform to where there was a pause, and I start from there again. And I have literally sometimes had to do the same paragraph 20 times. If it's a uniquely hard word or something. But I keep doing that. And then when I'm done with the script, I'm done with the editing. So it may take me anywhere from 30, maybe sometimes 40 minutes to record a full episode. And then I'm done. So I don't need any fancy editing. I don't need a separate editor. I don't know if there's a name for this style of editing, but it works for me. It's easier than doing editing for an interview show. There's no ums, there's no ahs, there's no breaks in conversation because it's scripted. So the workflow of what I do is actually pretty easy. The time-consuming part is the writing and research. And so that is what really prevents me from doing. Now, that being said, within the last year, I've now finally started hiring writers. So I have 2 writers, and they've taken a big load off my shoulders. So today I'm doing a bunch of interviews. I had a webinar that I listened to before this. I got a monthly podcast group that I'm going to tonight. So I'm doing one of their shows tonight. All I have to do is edit it. And editing a show takes about, I mean text editing, not audio editing. That takes maybe an hour. And everyone in the audience says, well, I don't know which writer wrote it. It's like, well, that's the point. Because by the time I'm editing it, hopefully it'll sound more like me, and then it's my voice. And so that's worked out pretty well.
That's really interesting because it's funny. We talk, one of the things that I always tell podcasters especially when they're starting out, is podcasting is like a paint job. It's all in the prep work. It's not how you put on the paint. Putting on the paint's the easy part. It's the washing the walls. It's taping everything off. It's masking stuff. It's that prep work. And so it's the prep and the writing. And you've got the topics then outlined. Like, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, I know you said you've had this same document for 6 years that you're pulling stuff on and off of. How many ideas do you typically have where waiting in the wings? Because I know that's a big problem for a lot of podcasters. Is your podcast not getting the results you hoped for? Are you feeling stuck and unsure how to grow your audience or make a real impact? We get it. Podcasting can be a challenge, but with the right strategies, it can be an incredibly powerful tool. That's why we're offering our free no-pitch podcast consultation. We'll spend 30 minutes with you identifying areas for improvement on anything from optimizing your audio or video quality to developing a content strategy that resonates with your customers. If you're ready to unleash your podcast's full potential, visit the link in our show notes to schedule your free consultation. Space is limited, so sign up today so we can help you create a podcast that truly shines.
The current master list is 970 different show ideas. Not all of these are going to see the light of day. Some of them will get merged together. So we have a weekly writers meeting, me and my 2 writers, and we've gone over some of these. So I just throw anything on the list when I come up with it. If I'm watching a documentary on TV, I'm like, that'd be an interesting thing. I'll just put it on there. Or if I'm reading something. And so we do that. And sometimes a topic just isn't enough for a full episode.
Sure.
So we had this one on a guy named Liver Eater Johnson, who was a mountain man. And so one of my writers looked into it. It's like, I don't know if we could do a full episode, but maybe we could do an episode on mountain men and how they lived and the other famous mountain men. I was like, yeah, we could do that. So it may morph into something else, or it might get split up. And the other thing that happens is you research an episode, and it's like, well, we came across 5 different things that could all be separate episodes. And it kind of just expands that way. So
you said 970.
Yes.
I mean, you're close. You're 2.5 years worth there.
So my last ones that I've added to the list are coconuts, because their propagation and everything else. I've seen them around the web. There's a whole interesting thing there. Widescreen film formats. The 1986 Cleveland Balloon Fest, which was one of the biggest they tried to set a Guinness record for the most balloons launched at once, over 1 million, and it was a disaster. They ended up closing down the airport because they had 1 million helium balloons.
We're in Cleveland right now, so yes, we know about this one.
Yes. So I don't know if that's a full show. I don't know if we'll ever do it, but I came across it. I'm like, that's really interesting. Maybe that could be something. So I throw everything on that list, and then there are things that sometimes aren't even on the list that I end up doing shows for.
That's truly amazing. And really, this stems just 100% from your curiosity on stuff.
Yeah. Which is why I said, I'm the avatar for the show.
It's interesting because, like, most of the times when we talk, we're talking with people that do guests on their shows, and we find that the most successful hosts are the ones that are genuinely curious about the person that they're talking to. For you, it's the same thing. It's just the subject. You're just genuinely curious about the subjects.
I considered doing an interview show, and I did one in the past. For 11 years, I did a show called This Week in Travel. And it was me and two co-hosts, and we had a fourth person who was always our guest every week. And it's hard to get good guests. And the guest makes the show.
100%.
And the top podcasts out there are able to get the best guests, fly them in, have interesting conversations. And if you can't do that, I don't think a show's going to fly. I could start a much better interview show now, having had a successful podcast, than I could if I tried doing that 6 years ago. And I'm bringing in enough now from this show where, maybe I could fly people in or something like that. But I purposely chose not to do interviews, and I think that was a good idea.
It's interesting you say that, because I totally see both sides of it. And I truly enjoy this show because I get to talk with people like you and I get to learn from people like you. In the same sense, I co-host another show where it's just her and I talking. We create notes ahead of time. We have a general idea what the other one's going to say. We work well together, and we don't have to worry about guests or anything like that. Now, my favorite bit about that, and I'm wondering if you get the same thing, we get pitched all the time someone that should be a guest on our show. They're like, oh, we've watched your show. We would love for this person to be a guest on your show. And I'm like, we don't have guests.
No, I get that. I don't even have a co-host. Right. And I got to remind people, I've done 2,000 episodes. There have been 0 guests.
My favorite question that I always like to say, I always like to ask these people, I'm like, do me a favor, like, who's been your favorite guest so far? That's the question that I always ask in the emails to send back to them. That being said, like, you've obviously monetized the podcast and monetized it well. Were you able to do that from day one as the podcast as its own asset?
Not really. What I did when I started is I put ads in the show, but I made my own ads for things that I had affiliate accounts for. So sure. I would do ads for audible.com based on my Audible account, based on whatever book fit that episode. I was a brand ambassador when I was traveling for a company called G Adventures. So I just did some gratis ads for them. But the point was to get people accustomed from day one to this being a show that is going to have ads. I didn't want to do it, and then 2 years later, it's like, oh, ads are in the show now. Like it was not something that when they appeared that it bothered people.
The intention behind this is something that I kind of want to dive into, because there's so many people start their podcast because they're like, I want a podcast, and they grab a microphone and they start yammering into it. And then they're like, great, I've got a podcast. When you started building this, what did you use to get like the step one, the step two? Because obviously the intention about you started this at a level 8, 9, or 10, rather than whereas most people are starting at a level 1, 2, or 3, if that makes sense. Like, what did you use for resources to get that intention and to get that structure to make sure you were doing that right?
So, like I said, I had very popular social media accounts, but that didn't do a whole lot for me. So when I launched the show, I would say in the first month of the show, I had 6,000 downloads.
Wow.
Yeah, but I get that by 8 a.m. now every day.
Interesting.
That's nothing.
Sure.
But so that was a couple hundred a day, but hundreds of, 200,000 Instagram followers, 100,000 followers on all these platforms didn't give me thousands of people listening.
Sure.
And that was something I learned right away, is that it is very difficult to convert someone from a different platform to an audio podcast. And I have had people with much bigger shows than me tell me the same thing, that social media does not convert well to podcast listeners. The best platform is probably TikTok, but even that's not great. The place you find podcast listeners is in podcasts, which is a radical thing to say, I realize, but 100% of the audience is going to be a podcast listener, and they've already figured out how to listen to a podcast and everything else. So where I found the biggest success early on was advertising in podcast apps. Overcast, Podcast Addict, places like that, Pocket Cast. And that had quite a bit of success. And I always tell people, and so you're looking at hundreds of dollars for promotion, not thousands or tens of thousands. I kind of always think of growth in terms of like factors of 10. When you're starting out, okay, 1, that's you, that's easy. 10, you probably know that many people personally they could get to listen. 100, okay, that requires a bit more work. You could probably do that by hand by literally just emailing people or reaching out or doing stuff. But then to get to 1,000, we're talking about like, let's say downloads per show, per episode. That's going to require a completely different strategy than you use to get to 100. And 10,000 will require something completely different yet again. And 100,000. So I'm in that 10,000 to 100,000 range right now. And to do that, quite frankly, you have to spend a lot of money. Because at the end of the day, a podcast is a media company. No different than a big Hollywood studio or a television network. The only difference, it's smaller, obviously, but you're competing for the exact same thing, which is people's time and attention. And there's a finite amount of that. It's zero sum. So they could be watching Netflix or they could be listening to your podcast, and they got to make a choice.
I love how you put that, because it is truly one of those things where we are all competing for that attention, and it's time. And I always preach, like, if someone's giving you the most valuable thing they have, their time, what value are you giving them back? What I find so interesting, and I know we've kind of talked about this, but you didn't hyper niche because so many people feel like they needed to do that. You're just like, I'm going to talk about interesting stuff.
I've broken every rule of podcasting.
You truly have. And so that's one of the things that I kind of really want to talk about. Do you think that it's because you have just found a way to stay interesting is what's made it, like, what's enabled your podcast to do what it's done and grow the way it's done? Because once again, like so many people, we talk about like that hyper niche thing. And then as we produce other podcasts, we see, like, if someone fits in a slot, boy, in a lot of cases, if they can own that slot, they're going to own that slot. But we're looking at the total addressable market of that specific slot. And in many cases, it's not even the 10,000. It might be the 4,000 or 5,000. In other cases, we're looking at some like the Business Fix podcast that I'm a part of. We're looking at middle and upper management, which is a huge number of people, and we've kind of niched in on them, but not hyper niched. Do you so I guess my question is, do you think your ability to grow has been more about, like, A, you've always got a really good production value, and B, you're just have interesting stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. And first, there is a niche. It's a podcast for curious people. And that in and of itself eliminates the vast majority of the population, because most people are not smart or curious.
Correct.
That's just a fact.
It is.
Like, I take great pride in the fact I have everything from truck drivers to literal nuclear physicists to 11-year-olds that listen to the show. And if you did those man on the street interviews where it's like, can you point the United States on a map and nobody can do it? I would like to think that everyone who listens to my show would do really well, and they would have to edit it out because, it's not interesting if you know it. But that's not a huge part of the population, and I've kind of accepted that. But there is a niche, even though superficially it's kind of not, because literally the name of the show is Everything Everywhere. So I'm not going to be talking about like an episode on like tips to grow your podcast.
Right.
That's not what the show's about. It's about things in history or educational type things, geography, whatnot. So there is a niche to it. And also, if you look at the most successful shows out there, like Joe Rogan's show, there's no real niche.
Sure.
I mean, he does talk to, you know, comedians and MMA people, but he could have anybody on the show, right? It's just a conversation show. And I think that by casting a very wide net, that's one of the reasons, you know, if you have a niche, you're going to have a niche audience, which means usually a small audience. You can do quite well monetizing a small audience if it's the right audience and maybe you have a good product, but it's never going to be super big. And the flip side to that is if you have a larger audience like mine, really advertising is the only thing that you really can do. I mean, there are other things you can do. I may do live shows or something in the future, but there isn't like a product. You know, maybe I'll write a book or something. I don't know how well that's going to do because nonfiction books don't really sell that well anymore. But it limits it on that side.
That's interesting. And it's an interesting, it truly is. It's an interesting approach. And because like you said, you break every podcast rule out there and it's worked, which to me is awesome. And that's one of those things where I love seeing, like, I can see why breaking that rule has worked so well for you. When people just get lucky, then my brain has a tougher time being like, wait, they just got lucky, or we can't figure it out. Yours is quantifiable as to why it's worked. And the rule breakers, I truly love like that. With that, you said it's 2,159 episodes. Is what's coming out today as we record this. I still remember that number, which is an insane, once again, that number, like I said, I still look at that and I'm like, is that decimal point in the right place? You've got some lessons in there that like an early stage podcaster can probably take it. Like, what would be one big thing that you would grab onto and be like, look, in 2,159 episodes, this is the mistake that I have made that kneecapped me or that really hindered me that you should not be doing?
I haven't made a lot of mistakes.
I obviously
That's not me being arrogant,
No.
but the format of my show is the exact same as it was in episode 1. They're a little longer now, but it's pretty much the same. I don't think I've made any super huge errors. One of the big lessons is you gotta produce the show. Like, I have never in history heard of a daily newspaper or a daily newscast that issued something that's saying, you know, today's issue just isn't up to our standards. So there will be no newspaper today because we don't feel it's good enough. That has never happened, right? Ever. And I hear some podcasters like, oh, don't worry about it. Just wait until you feel it's good and just publish whenever you think it's like, no, you have got to publish and you have to do it on whatever your timetable is. If it's a weekly show, then you got to produce it every week. I have a daily show and there have been many, many times, like 3 days ago, I'm up at 3 a.m. recording. I have done episodes a couple times where I have literally fallen asleep at the microphone while recording. That is no hyperbole. The very seat I am sitting in right now and this microphone. And when that happens and I nod off, I have to get up. And I live in Wisconsin. So if it's winter, I will literally walk outside to get really cold. So I will wake up and come back and finish it. But you have to do it. It has to be done. There are some episodes where you can barely hear me talk because my voice was so hoarse because I had a cold, but I recorded. And it has to be done. And people wonder how you do a daily show. It's like, well, it's a job. You know, no one says to somebody that works a 9-to-5 job, it's like, man, you go into an office every day for 8 hours a day. That's amazing. Yet no one says that. That's just the norm. That's what's expected. no, doing a daily podcast is it's easier than being a coal miner. There's a lot worse things in this world. I get to write and talk about stuff that I find interesting. That's not so hard in the big scheme of things.
It's funny. It's one of the reasons why I truly love being in this industry, because we really do get to do some very cool things. And it's on our schedule, and once again, you are a slave to the clock in a way that it's got to come out every day. But in the same sense, you've got the freedom that, okay, if I feel like doing it at 3:00 in the morning, I'm going to do it at 3:00 in the morning.
Now, to be fair, before I hired some writers, I would often do what I call an encore episode, which is just a rerun. And quite frankly, once you've done over 2,000 episodes, people forget a lot of the past ones. So you're able to do that. And I'll also tell you another thing I accidentally did, and this turned out to be genius. Just as a lark, this was maybe, I don't know, the first year or two of the show. Someone leaves a review saying, "Wow, Gary, I really love the show. I've listened to every episode." And so, as a joke, so I have this little segment at the end of the show where I'll usually read a review that someone left on Apple Podcasts or something. I made up this thing called the Completionist Club, based on like the SNL Five Timers Club. And I was like, oh, we have chapters all over the world. You can come in and, it's kind of a joke. And then more and more people started saying, I've entered the Completionist Club. Where's the local chapter? I was like, oh, well, you're in Baltimore. Well, we got crab cakes there. And, I was putting some local spin on it. And next thing you know, I have hundreds and hundreds of people who have listened to every episode of my podcast. I have so if you were to start playing my episode 1 and go all the way through, that is probably close to 17 or 18 days of continual audio content, not sleeping. And not only have I had people listen to every episode, I have had people, I had to create Diamond Elite status in the Completionist Club because some people have listened to every episode twice. And in one extreme case where I suggested he just seek help, one guy listened to every episode 4 times. So I'm creating, I held my 5th anniversary event for the show last July in Appleton, Wisconsin, where I live, which is not in the way to anything. We're kind of outside Green Bay. I had people flying in from California, New Jersey, driving in from every neighboring state to come take part in the show. I had kids, parents bringing kids to take pictures with me. I never intended any of this when I started. One of the other things I did when I started that turned out to be good, and I never really thought about it, was I never talk about politics or current events, ever. That makes all the shows more evergreen. And one of the things I realized, I did a kind of a quick analysis, not at what gives 5-star reviews, but what gives 1-star reviews. And one of the biggest, there were 2 things. 1, too many ads, and 2, people interjecting politics in something that was not political. If you have a political show, fine. That's what you're there for. So I never talk about that. And I've seen discussions online where people tried to figure out who I voted for, and they can't, which I think is a sign of success. And the other thing I do is I don't use any profanity in the show ever. And that, again, I didn't realize this, but I had a college roommate that said, yeah, I listen to it with my daughter every day, taking her to school. And I was like, oh, that's a whole market I never thought of. And it turns out there are tons of parents that listen with their kids, and they're able to do that because I made that decision to keep the show clean. So those 2 things, everyone talks about making evergreen content. My show is hyper evergreen. I something about the Byzantine Empire is going to be fine 100 years from now, most probably. I don't think that's going to change. So, which is why the Completionist Club works. And I'm also I've done some things that deal with there was a volcano several years ago off of Tonga that erupted, and I did an explainer video, or the Artemis mission that recently went to the moon. I did an explainer video on that. So there are a few things that are kind of a little dated, but for the most part, everything is completely evergreen and clean.
That's, once again, it's to me, the intention that you've had with that is huge. And that's the difference. But that I see so many podcasters, I don't want to call it sloppy, but they don't have that same level of intention with stuff. And that's big.
The reason I made those decisions is because a guy I listened to who had a podcast, they did nothing but that. It became hyper raunchy. And I literally calculated once, and like 70% of their show was not talking. It was a history show. It was not talking about history. And they would occasionally read reviews that they would mock of people that didn't like how they talked about or the politics. And I'm like, okay, you can make fun of it if you want, but I would say you could easily double or triple your audience if you just laid off it and kept to the subject at hand. And so one of the things I realized was, all right, I'll just, why antagonize people if I don't have to? So that's the decision I made. I think it's been a good one.
No, it's been a great decision. It truly is a great decision on that. Because once again, your audience, there's not the avatar for it is a group of people instead of the person, and it includes kids, which is awesome. One of the things that I like to ask people about, and I'm sure that this is going to be just an amazingly interesting answer. What are some of the future plans for you? As intentional as you have been about building everything thus far, like, what do you see as the future for podcasting, and more specifically, the future of like your show?
There's been a lot of talk lately about the move to video. Mm-hmm. This has all been done by Spotify and YouTube that want you to do videos so they can make more money advertising. The thing that nobody ever talks about, what are the CPMs on YouTube versus audio podcasting? If you are in a great niche on YouTube, like finance, you might get $15 CPM. A lot of people are getting closer to maybe a $2 CPM. The average in audio podcasting for a host-read ad is around $20, and it can go well up from there. So I think the market has spoken. And there's lots of data that you've probably seen that people have far better retention of ads from audio podcasting than they do on video. So I think a lot of the pivot to video is kind of hokum. The whole YouTube podcasting marketing strategy has just been calling YouTube videos podcasts. That's all it is. They've done nothing. So I could launch a YouTube channel in the future, but it's not going to just be a cut and paste of the audio podcast. It would be something different. I might use that as the basis for maybe I probably record a different voiceover for it. But it requires a lot of work too, which means more money. So if I were to put out a video every day, like I do for this show, I would need a team of people. So I'm going to have to get a lower CPM plus spend a lot more money. So that's a very challenging proposition, and there's a lot of risk. So that's always been kind of there, but I've never pulled the trigger on it. Another thing would be doing live shows. So this isn't a comedy show, but, I think I could probably do, if I could get people to fly into Appleton, if I were to just go to Chicago, New York, LA, or whatever, I think I could probably do something. I may do another test somewhere. Maybe I do a bar meetup and see how many people show up. And I would need to put together some sort of, you can't really do a live episode of this show. Me reading off of a script and constantly trying to repronounce words doesn't really go over well. So there would need to be something else. One of the things that people are always asking me about are my travels. So I have I can basically recall every place I've been. I have 50,000 photos that I can pull up at an instant and tell stories behind all those things. So that tends to go over well. Another thing would be possibly launching another podcast, maybe an interview show where I hire another writer and I just focus more on, I can record the shows easily enough. Maybe something like that. Running a tour. Early in the show, I thought about doing a tour for listeners. And I should add, when I was doing travel photography, it was pulling teeth to get 10 to 12 people to show up for a tour. And I ran tours in South Africa, the Galapagos, places like that. I had like 150 people in 48 hours that wanted to do a tour with me. And that was when the show was 1/10 the size of what it is now. So now I'm thinking like I could literally book an entire riverboat cruise in Europe or something and sell it out. And so there are opportunities. The thing that gets in the way of everything is the fact that it's a daily show. And that's kind of the problem. So there's other things, I'll probably do a paid version of the subscription version of the show shortly that doesn't have any ads. But a lot of that is so Apple has a greater incentive to promote you.
Yep.
More than an actual revenue strategy. I'm working on a book, but again, I'm not putting a whole lot of, it's about the future of learning and especially self-learning, because I think there's opportunities for that now that are just astounding. So yeah, the show doesn't lend itself to a simple product, or even like a service. I'm not going to do, one-on-one tutoring with anyone or anything like that. So yeah, those are some possibilities. I don't think audio podcasting is going to be changing a whole lot. I think if you were to set up something with an RSS feed right now, it'll work in 10 years. It worked 20 years ago. That's the beauty of it.
It's funny you say that because in fact, recently I had Dave Jackson in, and kind of podcasting, one of podcasting's OGs, and him talking about it kind of in the same way. He said, like, look, it's been around. Radio's still around. Podcasting hasn't killed radio. Netflix hasn't killed radio. There's all these other things that people are still going to gravitate to. And it's one of the things that I love about podcasting because it's convenient. I can have a podcast in while I'm driving, while I'm working in the yard, while I'm running the lawnmower. I can be learning, I can be entertained, I can be getting educated, all while doing something else. And
audio podcasting is the only thing that fits into those niches.
100%.
If you're in a long drive, you're not watching YouTube videos.
I hope not.
I certainly hope you're not.
Yeah, no. As someone that owns multiple motorcycles, I see it occasionally, but I hope people are not watching videos.
But people rely on email. Email is really important, right?
I agree.
When's the last time you said, "What is the future of email?"
It's just there.
It's just freaking email. It's the same protocol we used 30 years ago when the internet first started. We use it today. It works. It'll probably be the same thing tomorrow. We don't need to add a whole lot to it. It works. RSS feeds with audio podcasts work. And everything else, I think, is kind of just other companies that have an agenda.
I agree. I feel like I do feel like video can add something, but I don't feel like it can replace.
Yeah, there are some great YouTube channels out there. I watch YouTube. I'm not saying I don't, but it's a different thing.
It very much is. It very
and
much
I think
is.
what happened is a lot of people were listening to the Joe Rogan podcast on YouTube.
Yep.
And then they started to call that a podcast. And so now there's and then YouTube did some survey and they realized this. I'm like, hey, we can just call this podcasting. And so they created a podcasting, homepage. And I looked at it, I'm like, this is the same stuff that adds on my other homepage. Nothing has changed. I don't know what the difference is. And if everything on YouTube is a podcast, then, well, they have movies and TV shows on YouTube. What are they podcasts? And what is not a podcast at that point? And I don't know what the answer is. So as far as I'm concerned, YouTube is its own thing, and that's fine, but it's not podcasting.
I agree with that. There's a big piece to that. That being said, I always like to ask one kind of question as we close out here. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to like a business owner that is looking to like create a podcast to help them with some of their marketing and their authority, what would be that one piece of advice? And it can't be just press record. That's too lame of an answer we joke about. Is what would be that one piece of advice that you would give someone that's starting out?
Okay, before I answer your question, with regards to pressing record, one of my co-hosts when I did This Week in Travel was podcasting Hall of Famer Chris Christensen, who runs the Amateur Travel Podcast.
Yeah.
And I was traveling at this time, so I'd be all over the world. And we had an episode once where I was in Krakow in Poland, and I couldn't make when they were doing the show because I was going to go into the salt mine, which is a World Heritage Site. And so I was going to miss the show. But I'm down there, and I'm at the gift shop a mile beneath the surface of the earth, and I call in right in the middle of it because they were doing it on Skype, which was the thing at the time. And I think it was the world's deepest podcast. Like I was a mile below the earth, making podcasting history. I was only on for like a minute or two just to say hi, to check in, and then I leave. And then after the show, Chris, Podcasting Hall of Famer, writes me and says, I forgot to hit record. So it was lost.
We've all done it. Everyone in video or audio has done something of that nature where we've all said, like, look, that was a great take, but let's do it one more time just to make sure. And I'm going to press record this time.
Sorry. So my advice, there's one of the biggest problem in podcasting is that people give up on it. They started with the best intentions and then they just quit. And the reason is it's not a priority. It's just a thing they want to do. It's a side thing. And when something comes up, and something will always come up, the podcast gets put aside. So if you want the podcast to be successful, you have to make it a priority. And most people do not make it a priority. It's the third or fourth or fifth thing that they worry about because there's other stuff that's more important. And if you have it that far down your list, you're probably just going to abandon it at some point. So you need to make it a priority if you're going to go down this route. And there are far too many people that are like, I want to start a podcast. What should it be about? And that there is the check mark for failure. Because you want a podcast. It's like, I really want to be a pro athlete, but I don't know what sport I should play. It doesn't work that way, right? You have to have an expertise or at least an interest. And then I would like to share this with the world on a podcast. Doesn't work the other way around.
I couldn't have said that better myself. That is, I love the sport. I'm an analogy guy, so the sports analogy is really just
unless you are Bo Jackson,
right?
He could say that,
right? Bo Jackson could say that. Yeah, he could do anything. Yeah. That being said, where can people find your podcast? All 2,159 episodes of it.
Anywhere you listen to podcasts, just search for Everything Everywhere Daily.
I love that. Gary, thank you for the time today. I truly appreciate this. Your experience of recording 2,100 plus podcasts has shown through, and your intention behind it is truly amazing. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me.
For everyone else out there, I've got some interesting thoughts from today. I will be right back. Gary's, what a wealth of knowledge. But once again, 2,100 plus episodes in, and there's a couple of things that I want to touch on here. One is his intention from start to where he's at currently. The intention that he has had in the things that he is doing and the things that he has done. I mean, everything is very organized, step by step by step. Briefly there, we talked afterwards about how he has taken and he figures out what each listener brings in for him in ad revenue, and he figures out how much money he can spend on his own ads in order to make sure that that equation works and is still profitable for him. To me, once again, it's that intention about looking at this like, it's step 1, step 2, step 3. Where am I going with this? And what are the steps that I need to find in between with that? That is huge. The 100 show ideas. Now, I always tell people you need to have 10 to 15 show ideas before you ever start. The 100 show ideas, if you've got a podcast that's coming out with a new episode every day, you need 100 show ideas before you ever hit record. But to me, it really speaks to making sure that you've got that runway out in front of you. He records every day. He doesn't batch record, which I also found, an interesting way that he does it. But really, having a runway out in front of you of ideas, because there's nothing worse than showing up in front of the camera and in front of the microphone and being like, I have no idea what the heck I'm going to talk about today. That just shouldn't happen. Having that runway of ideas out in front of you really is a big thing. The next point that I want to talk about, this is something that we talk with people all the time about. You're not going to convert social media people into podcast people, and you're not going to convert podcast people into social media people. We've even found this on YouTube, that you're not going to convert shorts people into video people. It's different audiences. They are different people. The viewing capacity, the listening capacity, it's all very different. Now, should you create content for each one of those audiences if you can? Yes. Grab as many people as you can. But once again, don't think that your social media audience is going to help pull people into the podcast. It's just not. The last piece that I want to talk about is the ads. There's multiple ways to advertise a podcast. We would love to help you figure out how to advertise your podcast if that's how you would like to grow that. That all being said, do me a favor. Take care of yourself. If you can, take care of someone else too. I will see you very, very soon.
Creating engaging content can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. That's why I'm excited to share our Stomping Podcasting newsletter. You'll get actionable insights and expert tips straight to your inbox. These are to help you maximize your video marketing and podcasting return on investment. Head over to the show notes and click the link to subscribe to our free newsletter. Don't miss out on this opportunity to become a video marketing and podcasting pro.